Mrs. Madrigal. As in medieval.
You can't feel as ancient as I do. I've been apartment hunting all day. I'm Mary Ann Singleton.
Come on, I'll show you the flat. Well, there's a view. If you count a patch of bay through the trees, utilities included, small house, nice people. Did you just get here this week?
Is it that obvious?
The look is a dead giveaway. You can't wait to bite into that lotus.
I'm sorry?
Tennyson, you know, eating the lotus day by day, watching the crisping ripples on the beach and the tender curving lines of creamy spray, to lend our hearts and spirits wholly to the influence of something...
Does it come with furniture?
Don't change the subject while I'm quoting Tennyson.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be...
You'll get used to my babbling. They all do. Yes, some furniture's included.
Hello and welcome to Book versus Movie. This is a podcast where we read books that have been adapted into movies and then we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margot P. of coloniabook.com and this is my good friend and co-host Margot D. of Brooklyn Fit Chick.
Hi everyone.
We're already getting into the conversation about today's today's book and series, which is going to be fun. Or actually a series of books and a series of a television series. But we're just talking about if you're tuning in, you love the series as much as we do. We're just talking about the first season, series if you're in the UK, because it was in both places. Tales of the City, the television series. We'll talk about the book. It's mostly based on the first book, but there's some stuff from the second book. So, and later stuff. Anyway, we'll catch up on all of those things in just a moment. It is Pride Month. It is the United States has turned up the heat all over. We are all sweaty. You're probably somewhere schwitzing with us if you're in the U.S. And we are very, very excited. We've covered Pride Month. I think since the beginning, pretty much,
Absolutely.
Right?
Knowing us.
Yeah, for kind of a long time. And we've been at this for 10 years. So if you're just joining us because you love Tales of the City, oh, do we have many episodes for you. And if you just want Pride episodes, again, there are many, many, many of them. There are a few places where you can find our episodes. You can find back episodes. 10 years, you're not going to find like the whole catalog all in one place anymore. Sorry, it's just how the internet works now. But if you have suggestions for future episodes, if you want to meet other listeners of this podcast, if you want to interact with us, there's a few places where you can do that on the internet.
Okay, yes. So we do have a basic Facebook page and the episodes are posted there. So definitely like that. But we're much more interactive in our private Facebook group. So you have to look up Book VS Movie Podcast Group in Facebook and then ask to join. And we really do just talk about books and movies there. And we just ask that the book or the song or the magazine article, blah, 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 whatever it is, it has to be easy for us to get our hands on. A movie or, as we're talking about today, the TV series needs to be on a major streaming app. That's all we ask. Okay, so we're on Instagram, Threads, and Twitter, and at those places you spell out book versus a movie. And then we have a private email, a basic email. It's book versus movie podcast, spelled it all out, at gmail.com, and that's another place you can send us your suggestions. Or if you would like some stickers, just send us your email, and we will your address, and we will drop them in the mail for you.
And if you really enjoy the show and would like to help keep us in books and movies, you can also support us on Patreon.
Yes, so Patreon, you type in Book versus Movie Podcast. I believe it's Book VS Movie Podcast there. We have about 7 years worth of shows, 7 or 8 years. The most recent ones that I put up there, and it's basically from 2021 and then previous to that. So what just went up there, The Fast and the Furious, based on a magazine article, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Argo, The Little Prince, A Streetcar Named Desire, Harper Valley PTA. We also cover, songs to TV movies or movies. Everybody who supports us there, thank you so very much. We really appreciate it. There's also some free things on there. And also I post the trailers and sometimes scenes from the thing that we're talking about. So you can sign up there for free. and just get those things. Anyway, thank you so much. You also, another way you could support us is please leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. That would be amazing. Apple Podcasts, Good Pods. We're always doing well on Good Pods, Spotify.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us here week after week. We really, really appreciate it. And yeah, if you're not a member of our Facebook group, do come join us there. It is a very fun, very kind space. Yes, we it's fun to talk about books and movies, obviously. So, look, I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah, we had a lot of, by the way, listeners on Facebook who tell us how much they love this movie and this series, and they wanted to join us.
Okay, I will start with how I found this series. I was oh my gosh, I was probably my son's age. I was probably like 14, 15. And I live in the same neighborhood that I grew up in, which is right next to Hillcrest, which is the LGBT, it always has been neighborhood in San Diego. And that is where I hung out in my youth, but I still hang out there all the time. I mean, we're just there all the time. And back in the day, it had, it was like a little mini San Francisco, it's very that, but with its own kind of identity. And it had a lot of really fun thrift stores and used bookstores and sex shops and all kinds of really cool stuff. And I used to love to go and shop at the used bookstores. And there was this one used bookstore on Fifth Avenue. The building is still there, but the store is long gone. And it was called Cape Cod Clutter. It was right next to New News, which is a very popular lesbian bar. It's still open and one of the oldest in San Diego. And I wandered in there one day, and the woman was ironing. She sold books, but she also sold a lot of just like vintage junk. People called it at the time. My mother was always asking me why I was wasting my money on this stuff. And I remember she was ironing handkerchiefs. She was ironing old hankies. Came in and I was looking at the books, and she recommended to me two books that remains two of my favorite books of all time. Actually, it's 4 books, but it's 2 novellas and 2 volumes each. Nathaniel Hawthorne's Miss Lonely Hearts and the Day of the Locust, and A Cool Million, and what was the last one called? The Dream Life of Balso Snell. I took them home. I blazed through them, and I just loved them so much. I immediately went back, like probably the next weekend I was back in the store. And the woman's like, oh, well, if you liked those, you're going to want to read this book. And she gave me a first edition copy of Tales of the City.
Aww.
She gave it to me. I think she just gave it to me. But this was how clever she is. She just gave it to me. She's like, oh, you're going to love this. As a matter of fact, you're probably just going to want to get, I think there were maybe 4 of them at that time. She's like, you're just going to want to get all of them. Just go ahead and buy. And she had them all. She's like, just get them all. And you're just, I know you're going to love them. Just go ahead and get them. And so I bought them all. And she was absolutely right. And I just loved. I don't even know how many times I've read Tales of the City. It's something I pick up every now and again. It's so fun. It's so well written. And I didn't realize all of this is I didn't realize anything really about the author. So it's been really fun this week there's a lot I still didn't know about Armistead Maupin. But when did you read the series first?
Honestly, I found it through the TV series. So it's 1994 when this is on PBS, and my parents were like NPR and PBS people. So I always watched it. I always knew what was happening, and I saw the show, and I got really hooked on it. I wasn't living with my parents at the time, so I didn't watch it with my parents, but I had a friend who was like, you don't know these are based on books. And so she kind of shamed me into going to the Barnes & Noble or whatever. And I got the whole series of books, and I just started tearing right through them. And I'm the same way. Every few years I go back to it. For this episode, I actually found it was on Kindle, a graphic novel version of the first book. And
I saw that. I didn't even know that they did that.
I didn't either. And it's just the one I was trying to find for the other volumes.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, I love these stories. I love these people and these characters. And they're so flawed and so earnest and going through things. And they're very human. And I just... and the way he writes, like, you're just so like, well, I got to find out what happens. I mean, it's...
Yeah. And I didn't realize until we were looking into him for this week. I mean, I knew a lot of stuff about him. This is, first of all, the original Tales of the City came out in the San Francisco Chronicle. He was a writer for the Chronicle, and we'll talk about that part of his career. And I knew that he had Southern roots. I just didn't realize that they were like all the way down to the bedrock kind of Southern roots. I did not quite realize the degree. And again, we'll talk about that in a second. But now that I know that, and I'm re-looking at the work again, it does have a very it has a very Southern sensibility. It's about the quintessential California city. I mean, I think, even as a Southern Californian, you have to defer, like, there's a reason San Francisco is the most expensive city to live in the United States.
So Margos based in San Diego. I'm based in Brooklyn, but I did go to college in San Jose. So I lived in the Bay Area for a few years, and I know it very well. And I do miss that city. There's something special about it.
But I never realized how much he was bringing that kind of Southern storytelling tradition to this setting, to this backdrop. I never realized that until this week. So let's talk about this very fascinating Mr. Armistead Maupin.
And it's his real name, Armistead Jones Maupin Jr. Yes, he was born May 13th, 1944. He's still with us. He's 80 years old. Like I said, I think I just said, he was born in D.C., but his family, his alma mater is UNC Chapel Hill, North Carolina. He had family that fought for the South. He grew up in a family he wrote typical patriotic segregationists. And he was just as conservative as they were when he was growing up, because this is all he knew. He did serve in the Vietnam War, and then also previous to that, he's a veteran of the Navy. He's in Charleston, and then he moves to San Francisco. He's in the AP. And then in 74, he starts writing. And there's a paper that's called the Pacific Sun, and it still exists. And like a lot of newspapers at the time, they had a morning edition and an afternoon edition. And he put out these stories, and then it moved to the San Francisco Chronicle, and then it truly blew up. He just writes about all these people that are having in San Francisco at the time. This is also what's amazing is in the 70s in San Francisco, there's all these big changes, everything that's happening in America. Like San Francisco is one of those hot spots where it's especially happening. I would say like cults, you have your Jim Jones, Manson started up there in the Bay Area. This is like post the hippie life in San Francisco. Believe it or not, there were pockets of San Francisco that were not friendly to homosexuals. It's a place where there are
extremely conservative,
very conservative. You have Irish and Italian Catholics that are there that they become cops and firemen. There are places around San Francisco that are almost suburban. They are very family oriented, and it's hard to believe, but there were people who were arrested for going to a gay bar back in the 70s. There were cops that were not okay with the behavior. So you have that. You had the mayor of San Francisco and Harvey Milk were murdered in 77. You had, like I said, the Jim Jones thing. You had the Zodiac killer. There's a lot that's going on in San Francisco. Like there's a lot going on in America, but in that town, he's writing about things, and he's writing about a group of people. And of course, what we have is a transplant, and her name is Mary Ann Singleton, and she's from the Midwest, and she comes and she decides to stay there. And she stays with a woman named Mrs. Madrigal, who has this gorgeous house in Russian Hill. And it's this tale of gay people around town, straight people, bisexual people, people on the down low, people who are out, and their love lives and the things that are upsetting to them and wonderful to them. There was a whole thing, like he was so popular in the 70s. He got fan letters for the characters, but one person wrote to him about the Zodiac killer, and it turns out it was Dave Toschi, who was on the original Zodiac team to try to find him, because he was addicted to the fame.
What's going on with this guy?
Oh, he was addicted to that early fame. Like, he was always on TV, and they made all these movies based on Tashi, you know, with the overcoat and the everything. He wrote these letters to Maupin about, you know, we should bring up the Zodiac case again, because they hadn't heard from him in years. Turns out it was Toshi writing to him, the detective who lost his job and was demoted and blah, blah, blah. It's so just unbelievable. It's so fascinating. So these books come out, and he starts writing it from the novels come out from 78 until just this year, 2024.
Yeah. So they started, 1978. 1980 is the second one. 1982 is the third one. We should also say, you know, he's writing contemporaneously about this scene in San Francisco, you know, again, it was very much in full swing, the what they called at the time the gay rights movement. And now we just, you know, just generally it's expanded to the rest of this more alphabet. The era right before the explosion of the AIDS epidemic.
Right.
And so he kind of steps into this arena. It's really interesting to me. We were just talking about how today we're going to be discussing mainly the first and second book in the series. He was writing it at the time that it was happening. He was he was talking about the night spots in that he's talking about the bathhouses, the cocktail bars, the society places. Like, those are the real places that the real people were going to at that exact same time. So having placed himself in this, as I say, contemporaneous accounting of the scene, he's not knowingly putting himself in a position where now he has to address the AIDS epidemic. What I think is so interesting about the first and second book is, of course, we didn't know about it yet. We know it's coming reading it. And I think even by the time I read it, 15, let me think. By the time I read it, we knew it was already like a thing. Armistead Maupin doesn't know it yet, and the characters don't know it yet. So it's like we are all kind of entering into that era together. There's, we'll talk about it when we talk about the book. But anyway, so here he is. Now he's like almost a journalist telling us the story of how this is all unfolding in this one very important epicenter through these fictional characters that he's created. But the kind of overarching theme of the Tales of the City, and he's written other things, by the way, but we're going to be just talking about the series. The overarching theme of his series, and he says this himself, is the whole notion of chosen family. You know, knowing that and going back and reading the series again, it just struck me a little bit different this time. Of course, now being at an age where, you know, you and I have, you know, we are members of each other's chosen family in many ways. And so are these people in the book. But the thing, it kind of struck me a little bit different that the book opens with Marianne Singleton. She's a secretary. She's in her early 20s. I forget exactly how old she is.
Just out of college.
Just out of college. Doesn't really know what she wants to do in life. And she's really on her first solo, single gal vacation. And she has decided to go to San Francisco. And she's been in San Francisco on her little fun getaway, her little Midwestern getaway to Sodom and Gomorrah on the coast.
Wow.
I mean, I remember the first time I saw San Francisco. You know, even as a Californian, it's its own thing.
Yes.
She's been there for a few days, and she just suddenly decides, I'm going to stay. I think I'm going to try to live here. And I had that feeling about New York, of going to New York and feeling like, I think I want to live here.
Same.
And I didn't feel that way. I love San Francisco, but I've never had that. But I understand that I've had that experience at that age of feeling like, I think this is my next step. It's hard to describe. Like it's just a feeling that you get, that you're just drawn to it.
It's beautiful, and the weather is great. I mean,
so beautiful.
So my friend Sonia lives in San Francisco. It's 97 in New York. It's like 90 where Margos is in San Diego. It is 64 in San Francisco.
Oh, the weather!
In and of itself.
People talk about
Yeah.
People talk about the weather in San Diego. I'm sorry. Anytime for work I get sent to San Francisco, like for this time of the year, I'm like, oh, thank you for sending me to
low
San
humidity.
Francisco.
It's
so
beautiful.
nice.
I mean, and it's got the ocean. You can be in the mountains in no time. It's got everything. And the city's very cultured, and there's so much history going on there. I know history compared to the rest of the world, and it's, but it is.
But for the U.S., it's a lot.
It's a lot, and the food is great. I mean, there's just so much to recommend about it. It's just always been, expensive. It's just ridiculous now. But back then, you could be a secretary for somebody and then find an apartment, even if it's a roommate situation. Like, I don't know what you do now with.
I don't know. What do young people do? I guess they just have to leave when they get out of college. It's still a big college town too.
Yeah.
It just has so much. So she's decided, she doesn't know anybody. She has a job back home, and so we see her right at the moment that she has made that decision, and she gets on the phone and she calls her mom back in Cleveland, which in those days was not an easy thing to do, y'all. You couldn't just whip your phone out of your pocket, and she had to gather up. Who knows how much she had to
or call collect. That was a whole thing.
She probably called collect. Yeah. Cause she's on a payphone in a coffee house or something. And she calls her mom to tell her, and her mom, again, now as a mom, her mom understandably freaks out. What do you mean you're not coming home? What do you mean call your boss? You want me to call your boss? First of all, she should be calling her boss, but okay. Anyway, so yeah, she tells her mom, I'm not coming home. And she's made this huge life decision right at the very beginning of the book, which I think is really, really cool. And now what? As we say, she's only been there a couple of days. She's lived her entire life in Cleveland. Okay, so now we're going to watch her find a place to live and find a job. So we're now she's in some ways she's our surrogate, that we're seeing San Francisco through her first timer's eyes. But he also gives us. He's not entirely doing that, but it's also, we're also seeing stuff about her that she doesn't always make. Everybody makes mistakes in this book, which is another thing I really like. Anyway, so she finds herself to this apartment on Barbary Lane, kind of kooky landlady, wears a lot of kimonos.
Have a big place, all to myself, but have people around to hang out with, and yeah.
And then she's, and the whole place, besides the landlady, the whole place is filled with a curious melange of young people who have also kind of found their way, been drawn to this living situation. I don't want to use the word decadent, but this is before HIV. This is after the Summer of Love. This is, disco and gay rights, and they are just having fun. Now, that doesn't mean that they're completely fulfilled,
right,
or happy, but they are having fun. So we get to have fun. We get to have fun with them, but we also get to see the downside of all these shallow relationships. And so each one of them, each of the characters, and we'll talk about who they are, each of the characters comes to eventually to realize that they are their chosen family, that they have decided to all come together, and they have each other's backs. They squabble like family. They have disagreements. They don't see things the same way always, but ultimately, by the end of the book, they are a family, which is so much fun.
Right. Yeah, so we have Marianne who lives there. So Mrs. Madrigal, Anna Madrigal is we should, by the way, say things that we're going to be spoiling details. So if I remember the first time I saw this series, I didn't know where it was going to end up. And I was just remember being completely surprised. Oh my gosh. Lives there. There's a man named Michael Tolliver, who's a young gay man. That's her friend. There's Mona, who works at an ad agency, who's bisexual or lesbian. There's Brian Hawkins, who's a heterosexual man, that the cis heterosexual man who's the standard issue, they kind of throw him in her way, Marianne's way, when she's having a bad day. But we also have the Halcyon family, and they own an ad agency in San Francisco, and Mona works there. And then we have Edgar, who owns it and who runs it. And he's a senior.
Yes.
He has cancer, I guess we find out. He's dying. So he's married to a woman that there's a high society, by the way, in San Francisco that's very important. They have
another
an opera.
important thing about this book is it shows us the different levels of San Francisco society at that time, or some of them anyway.
And it's still there. I mean, there's people always say, people that watch Bravo, why don't they make a Real Housewives of San Francisco? Because those people have real money. The women that have money in San Francisco, those are old school families. They don't seek press. The Gettys, those kinds of people, they keep to themselves. So there's they have their own route. It's a gilded cage that we're finding out. Like they can't be themselves completely. So Edgar has a son who Beecham. I always want to say
son-in-law.
So son-in-law, excuse
Beecham.
me. Beecham. Yeah. He has a daughter named Dee Dee, and Dee Dee and Beecham have a relationship where he goes to work, she's at home. They're very wealthy, and they want to suck up to the father-in-law to inherit everything. But he's sleeping with other women and other men on the side, and Dee Dee's very lonely. Beecham is. And then Dee Dee's very lonely, and so she has sex sometimes with the Asian delivery guy who comes by the house. There's Mona's girlfriend is a girl named Dorothea Wilson, and Dorothea was a model, a black model living in New York and traveling the world, and then she comes by the house for a little bit. Those are the main. Marbury Lane, they're all in this house. They all have their own apartments. Michael comes to live with Mona, and so they're best friends. And she calls him Mouse. She basically gets fired from her job, but she makes herself get fired from her job because she's furious. But they're people that they love to swing wild and have lots of partners, but they also are both romantic, and they also are looking for somebody. So especially Michael and Marianne are looking for partners. They're not, so some other people are like Brian. They're out to have a great time. Brian, by the way, is I'm a heterosexual guy in San Francisco. This is the world's my oyster, I'm a rarity. All the women are looking for me. But he and Michael become friends, and they both kind of admit it's sort of empty, and it's very hard to meet people. It's very hard to make connections with people. If you want to just get laid and have a great time and party, that's pretty easy. But if you're looking for, basically all these people are looking for human connection.
Right. Yeah. And the landlady, Mrs. Madrigal, we see that she's very selective about who she rents to. It seems random, but it's not random. And we learn over the course of the book that Mona, who was the copywriter and then she loses her job, is the only one of the tenants that Mrs. Madrigal approached and offered an apartment to at the place. Everybody else is looking in the want ads and comes by, and she sizes them up and decides if she wants to rent to them or not. And there's this illusion throughout the book that Mrs. Madrigal has some secret in her past. She's very funny. She's very bohemian. And she has this secret that we believe Mona knows what the secret is, but Mona is very protective of that secret and is not going around blabbing it to people. She says over and over again, they have this conversation over and over again as we meet different people, where Mrs. Madrigal will say, "Oh, did you talk to Mouse about me? Oh, did you talk to Marianne about me? Did you tell Brian about me?" And Mona over and over again says no, that's not for me to tell. I'm not going to tell. So we know throughout the book that there's this secret. Now, Mr. Halcyon, who is the society giant of industry, he runs this very, very important ad agency. As Margos said, he is not well. We find out he's keeping it from his family. Mm-hmm. He's in denial. He's dying and he's in denial.
It used to be pretty common. People wouldn't admit to having cancer. Because it was such a quick decline.
Yes. But not only that, even your doctor wouldn't tell you.
Sometimes that happens. Yeah.
Yes. So he's struggling, and we watch him going through the different sort of phases of coming to acceptance, and he's angry. He can buy anything, but he can't, especially in the 1970s, it was not the same landscape for cancer as it is today. So he's in the park and he's kind of thinking, trying to decide. I think he's trying to decide if he's going to tell his family or not, or he's trying to decide what he's going to do about it. And he just happens to be sitting next to Anna Madrigal, Mrs. Madrigal, and they strike up a conversation and they really hit it off. And they start seeing each other and they start having a very, very deep relationship. They just really, really connect. And so he falls deeply in love with her, and they have this really, and so what I'm saying is, as the young people are roaming all over the city and going to bathhouses and going to dance contests and this and that and the other thing, cruising and all that, seeking some kind of a connection, Mrs. Madrigal is just sitting on a park bench, and it literally just comes and sits right next to her.
Right. It's like the love of her life, like just sits, like, I know. And they're like you said, they're best friends right away.
Mm-hmm. And so then for a lot of the book, they have, they're meeting up and they have these really lovely, it's just beautiful. They have these lovely conversations and they're really connecting. As I say, meanwhile, the kids are just like trying things and failing and falling on their faces all over the place and having some fun, but not having the kind of deep connection with, romantic connection. They're connecting with each other, but they're not having that romance that Mrs. Madrigal is having with Mr. Halcyon. Marianne has a brief fling with Beecham. Beecham is the worst.
He's a snake.
He's so terrible.
Yeah, he's terrible to everybody. He's miserable.
He's so awful. He's such a terrible person. We have the society, the upper, box at the opera society people. And we learn that even within that society, there's a gay clique of society people, and the A-list gays, he calls them in this book, and they are very gossipy and very catty, and there's older ones and younger ones. One of the people that Michael starts seeing this doctor at a certain point, and the doctor is one of the younger set of these A-list gays. Can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Okay. Michael is part of this. John is part of the doctor is part of this set of A-list gays, and he brings Michael along. And Michael is very much like Marianne. He's from the South. He's very innocent. The picket fence and the two dogs and the whole bit. So he's really interested in John, and John brings him along to this party with the A-list gays, and the A-list gays are vicious. Michael's like, I don't know, what have I gotten myself into, And so there's class stuff going on too, on top of everything else, not just discrimination about gay versus straight. And there's a lot of racial stuff. We get glimpses of a lot of racism in these different class systems that they have. Super interesting the way that he kind of takes us in and out of these worlds, and we see their various foibles and shortcomings, privileges that they enjoy, at what expense. It's just so well written. It's so fun and so entertaining. I don't want to spoil absolutely everything. Eventually, Mr. Halcyon, who's having the affair with Mrs. Madrigal, Mr. Halcyon gets a blackmail letter. Somebody knows about his affair with Mrs. Madrigal. We don't know what they know or how much they know, and we still don't know what Mrs. Madrigal's secret is.
In book one.
Mm-hmm. But Mr. Halcyon is dying, and he really doesn't feel like he has anything to lose. And he's a little concerned about what it might mean to his wife and daughter, but he kind of knows that, we're going to be fine. They have plenty of money, and, that kind of helps a lot.
Yes, it does.
When society snubs you and you have some nice money to help you dry your tears, it tends to go okay. So he's not really that worried about them. He's more worried about them, I think, dealing with his illness than he is about them finding out that he's having this affair with Mrs. Madrigal. So Mrs. Madrigal, who's a very decent person, and everybody throughout the whole book is talking about what a decent, kind person she is, and we see that she is. So because she is a decent, kind person, she cannot keep this secret from the man that she loves. And so she tells him her secret, but she doesn't tell us her secret. We don't know what her secret is. there are clues there, and if you know it and you reread the book, like you're like, oh yeah,
that
clearly,
makes sense.
Da, da, da. But if you're just hearing it, if you're just reading it for the first time, you may not know. And I really love the way that he does that. That even the author, even Maupin, is keeping her secret, which is I really like.
Yeah.
So she, whatever the secret is, we don't know. Whatever the secret is, Mr. Halcyon is not bothered by it at all. And if anything, they have an even stronger bond than they had before.
It's true love.
So it is really true love. And it is such a sweet love story. Anyway, it's one of my favorite love stories, I think. As the book ends, and I love that the book ends on Christmas Eve. The blackmailer has been dispatched. Mrs. Madrigal is throwing a Christmas party for her chosen family, who are a mess. None of them are any closer. None of them are in any kind of a real relationship, romantic relationship. But they are in a family with each other now, which they weren't at the beginning, and now they are. And so there they are on Christmas, and Anna has invited Mr. Halcyon, and he doesn't show because, spoiler alert, he's died. It's so sad.
Yeah.
But that's basically the book. There's so many subplots that are so much fun.
And we'll talk about that with the series, because there's stuff that pops up, because I really want to talk about the series.
It's not long. It's a quick read.
It's like 130 pages. The graphic novel's even shorter than that. We both were talking off the air about different audiobooks we got. So I purchased the entire book. It's like 800 pages of just Barbary Lane. That's what I have. And then there's a audiobook that I have that's like, I don't know how many hours, but it's on Armistead Maupin reading it. You had a couple of there's lots of ways you can take in this material. So we're going to flash back into time. God, it was 30 years ago. Margot is 94.
Ay,
ay, ay, ay. We both just at the same time went, oh my God. Wow. Okay. So it was started, this is not, so in actually 93 is when it originally aired in England on Channel 4. So 94 is when it comes to the PBS to America. And it's a huge,
right.
Yeah. So we're going to play the trailer for the series, and then we're going to talk about it. And I just can't wait.
Would you call Mr. Lassiter and say I won't be in on Monday?
Oh, sweetheart, I'm not sure you should ask for an extension on your vacation.
It's not an extension, Mom. See, I'm not coming home. I want to start making my own life. Have my own apartment.
Small house, nice people.
I'm Mona Ramsey, right below you.
Did you just get here this week?
Is it that obvious?
I'm a grown woman now.
Give it time. The city loosens people up.
I love you, goddammit.
But you're not here.
Marianne, wait a second. What's the problem?
Problem? You are a married man. That's the problem.
Oh, I'm straight as they come. I just don't like competition.
You always get what you want. You're a lot like me.
She thinks you think she's weird. Oh, great.
It's wonderful.
Just a preview.
Okay, so the director is Alistair Reed. The screenplay is by Richard Kramer. Here are just some of our stars. Olympia Dukakis, Donald Moffat, Chloe Webb, Laura Linney, William Campbell, Paul Gross, Thomas Gibson is in this movie, Barbara Garrick. We have people that kind of, I think Ian McKellen.
Perfection.
Yeah.
Can we just say, I'm just going to say, spoiler alert, perfection.
This cast is
perfection.
Perfect.
Stop it. It's like, what? And I forgot, because I hadn't seen this in a long time, this series. It's so good. I don't know how they capture San Francisco at that time without hitting you over the head with it. Mm-hmm. It's not like hippie daisies all over the place. cast, absolute perfection. There were several series of this that they did.
Right.
This, in my opinion, is bar none the best one with the best cast. The cameos. Sir Ian McKellen, as Margot just said.
Right.
So we talked about the A-list gays. Okay, the A-list gays, get ready for this. If you've not seen the series, you're going to plots. The A-list gays are led by Sir Ian McKellen at his cattiest, and his partner is Bob Mackie, people.
I mean...
Bob freaking Mackie, who is deliciously horrible. He's so good.
We also have Paul Bartel is in this, and Lance Loud. So the Loud family was a PBS family. They had a reality show based on their lives in the early 70s. And it was a big deal because Lance came out as gay and the parents got divorced. It was like two things.
It was a humongous thing.
Yeah. The Loud family was a very, very big deal. And this was on public television. They became stars. So he, like I said, he came out as gay then. So then he has a part in here. I don't even know where to begin. It's so well done. I mean, let's talk about, first of all, Anna Madrigal, Olympia Dukakis in this movie, R.I.P. And
I'm just clapping.
I know.
Clapping.
Slow clap.
I cannot.
Who could you get that's better? That's more.
How? It's almost like they were saying, Olympia Dukakis needs a series. What's the best role for Olympia Dukakis? Of course, she should be. I don't know how, because I didn't know who Olympia Dukakis was when I read this book for the first time. Somehow, that's who was in my mind. Like, that's exactly what Mrs. Madrigal looked like to me when I read that book for the very first time when I was like 15. It's her. It's her.
Is that the answer?
What's the question?
Gertrude Stein.
Oh, I don't think she said it. Do you? No one's that clever on a deathbed.
What would you say?
How about, oh, shit? Would you like a sandwich?
Yes.
It's made from focaccia bread.
Thank you. I'm Edgar Halcyon.
That's nice. I'm Anna Madrigal.
The way she moves, she's just, she's so perfect. She's so wonderful.
Her and Donald Moffat, who was he was a character actor who was just in everything.
Everything. He's fantastic in this.
They're so
I don't know
good.
why he didn't do the other series. I just love him in this.
Maybe he just retired. I mean, he was older, but they have like incredible chemistry, like you said, like right from the start. And she's teaching him how to live. Like, they fly kites and they just do so many things together. And we have, Chloe Webb plays Mona. And I love Mona. She's a woman from like another generation who's like trying to make it in San Francisco with men that talk down to her. She also likes to party. She has a girlfriend that comes and visits. And her girlfriend, like I said, is a Black model, and she's coming back to San Francisco area, and she knows that she's from there, but they never meet her family. And Chloe Webb is just so good in this part.
Another one that's like, that's exactly who I pictured.
Oh, that's
exactly who I pictured when I read that book.
The curly red hair.
She's Mona.
I mean, she's just Mona. And so everybody has their secrets, or everybody, there's lots of subterfuge, and it's all about people like putting up a front to get what they want to find love. And for Mona, it turns out, and once again, we're spoiling the details, it turns out that Mona, she tells her that she has a family, but she doesn't really keep in touch. And they're in Oakland, and Oakland and San Francisco are right next to each other. It's not a big deal to visit your family, but she never meets. And so Chloe Webb so Mona is just like, what's going on? Why haven't I met your parents? She does meet the parents, and it's like just before Christmas, they come over. And it turns out that her parents are white, and it's that Dorothea is her name. Dorothy she calls herself Dorothy as a model. Her name is Dorothy, but it turns out she's taking pills, vitiligo pills, to make her skin black, which is what some people. Yeah. So she says, I'm actually white. I've been pretending to be. That's her story. And then I super love, I don't know why Marcus D'Amico didn't go on to the second series. I always get
Marcus D'Amico, just the name. I always get Marcus D'Amico mixed up with Donald Moffat. So when I said Donald Moffat a second ago, I meant Marcus D'Amico. Donald Moffat is not in the series after that because his character dies. Marcus D'Amico is recast, and it's weird. I don't know quite what happened. It's something to do with this official story or unofficial story is that he was ambivalent about coming back with this character. I don't know if he was uncomfortable playing. No, he's wonderful.
He's so good, and I think he didn't want to be typecast or sometimes
Maybe.
Actors. I don't know. He just
so
wanted to revisit that
it.
character, but he's so good in it. It's a shame. He starts dating Dr. John Fielding, which is William Campbell. Billy Campbell is, I think, how he goes by now. But he's so good. They have this relationship. So Billy Campbell is a gynecologist, obstetrician, OBGYN. So he is a doctor that Michael is dating, Mouse is dating, but Mouse doesn't have a job, and Mouse is just kind of floundering a little bit economically. So Mouse enters a contest, a disco dancing contest, and he's dancing in his underwear. John just happens to drop by just to get a drink or something, and he sees his boyfriend on stage dancing in his underwear, and he just walks away because believe it or not all gay men are just like over the top and want, you know what I mean? He just he just wants a quiet life. Like he just so it's so heartbreaking when they break up. He is the doctor for Dee Dee, and Dee Dee is the wife of Beecham. Who's a total creep. But Dee Dee is in her own kind of gilded cage, like I said. She's very wealthy, but she's also not raised to be self-sufficient or think for herself. Her husband cheats on her. She knows it. He doesn't really hide it very well. He doesn't like her very much. They don't have that much of a connection.
He's really horrible. It's like, it's just not a good marriage, but it's mainly because he is horrible.
He's a creep.
Yeah.
He's a jerk. So she has sex with the delivery boy and then winds up pregnant.
She's so lonely.
So lonely.
She's very, very lonely.
And they have the hots for each other, but she's super lonely and wants that validation. She winds up pregnant, and then her husband's like, well, how is that possible? Because we're not. Yeah. So whether or not she's going to keep the baby is something that's kind of out there. Marianne Singleton, and I just love this name, Marianne Singleton. If you're just going to talk about
such a good name.
A single girl from the Midwest that comes to California, and Marianne has a quick fling with him, Beecham, that doesn't work. She's the one that's looking for love, and then we didn't even mention this because I hate this. I don't like this story, but there's one thing I could take out. It would be the Norman aspect because it's very creepy. It's
very, very creepy. But you know what? Again, like we talked about, this time in San Francisco was a creepy element going on.
Absolutely.
I mean, it was. So he goes there. I mean, I'm sure at the Chronicle, like he was covering stuff like this. So I'm sure, like every single thing that we read in this book is stuff that was actually. I don't for a second doubt that this is stuff that he encountered as a journalist
or heard about.
San Francisco. Yeah.
So I should say what it is. So Norman is a very odd man that lives in the building, and he and Mrs. Madrigal doesn't completely trust him. He's like staying with a friend.
He
or
says
something.
He's the vitamin salesman, and he seems very tight-laced. He wears a clip-on tie. There's something like he's trying very hard to seem normal, kind of a thing.
And Marianne is the kind of person that wants to make everybody comfortable, and so she's somebody
very
naive. And when she sees someone that's struggling, she wants to help them, and she sees in him like, oh, that was me. I was somebody when I came here. I didn't know what I was doing, so I'm going to help somebody out. That's her whole thing. And it turns out that he's actually little girl that he's taking care of occasionally, that he says he's babysitting, and it's a friend. Turns out it's digital child sexual assault. They would call it child porn at the time. This is what you call it
that's
now.
What they called it then. Yeah.
Right. And so the way it's written for me is a little, but because he's like, oh, she loves it, and she's, and it's very.
I know, it's so gross. But
I'm sure
that's something that he saw.
They don't dwell on it. They just mention it by the way.
And in the book as well, they don't go into graphic detail. Like, we're talking about Beecham being a jerk and a creep and all that. Like, this is a whole different criminal, the worst of humanity level.
And he's also investigating Mrs. Madrigal. So that's his. So he's doing two things. So Marianne is trying to be his friend, and then she's suspicious of him because he also doesn't let people into his apartment. He doesn't hang out. He doesn't smoke pot with everybody. Like, he's just. So she searches his place and she finds the pictures of the girl, and so she is seeing. She's chasing after him. They're by this mountaintop. And she's chasing after him like, I know the truth. What are you doing? I have to go to the police. I'm going to take care of this, blah, blah, blah. And he falls off the side of the mountain.
He's very drunk. He's very drunk. And she actually tries to save him. Like, get away from the edge of the cliff. And she tries to grab him and help him. But she
grabs his tie. But because it's a clip-on tie, he just falls right out. And then she tells Mouse what happens. She's like, I don't want to, and he's like, don't tell anybody. They'll find his body.
Yeah.
Let's just pretend, but burn the photos and let's just all that stuff. So that's one of the secrets that's going on there.
Oh, I forgot to mention some of the other, all the cameos are flooding back. Parker Posey.
Oh, yes.
Janine Garofalo. Parker Posey is, so when Marianne first decides that she's going to stay in San Francisco, she just decides I'm staying. And then, okay, well, where am I staying? Because I can't stay in a hotel.
I can't afford that, yeah.
Well, can't afford to stay in a hotel while I find an apartment. Oh, there's this girl I went to high school with. She lives in San Francisco. She's a stewardess. So Connie, she calls Connie up, and Connie's like, yeah, come on over. And I love Connie in the book. I love Parker Posey as Connie. She's, like I say, she's a stewardess, and she is all in on the swinging 70s San Francisco lifestyle. And she's going to the bathhouses. She's doing all the things, orgies, and the whole bit. And Marianne is trying not to be judgy, but she's being super judgy, and she's cannot wait to get out of there. Whereas Connie is like, my friend, it's very right from the get go. It's like, this is not her chosen family. Connie is not her chosen family.
Connie, bless her heart. And then it turns out, do they find out in the first book, or maybe it's the second or third?
No, it's in the second or third book even.
Yeah, she becomes pregnant and she dies. How does she die? Do you know? I can't remember.
I don't remember either. I don't remember when. I remember when she dies. She I think in the first book she does hook up with Brian though.
Yes.
She and Brian have a one night stand. And it's very sad. It's her birthday,
Yeah.
These people are not, for all of their fun and swinging and all of this and that, it's not going so, the 70s aren't going so great for them. So she has this one night stand with Brian, and neither one of them can keep the other one's name straight through the whole thing. And anyway, eventually, she becomes pregnant. I think that's I think it's the third book.
Right. And then eventually Brian and Marianne get together.
Yeah, later on in the series.
Later on, but not in the first season.
Hi. So what is it? Furniture?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm Brian Hawkins, down the stairs.
Marianne.
Yeah, I know. Mrs. Madrigal told me about it. She said you needed help with something.
I can't imagine what...
Do you want to let me in on it?
I think Mrs. Madrigal is matchmaking.
You don't have any furniture to move?
It's kind of embarrassing. Well, I had just finished telling her how there were no straight men in San Francisco.
I know, it's great, isn't it?
Oh, Brian, I'm sorry. I thought you were straight.
Oh, no, relax. Oh, I'm as straight as they come. I just don't like competition. Would you like to have a nightcap or something?
Anyway, because that winds up, Elliot Page winds up playing their adopted child in the in the Netflix show. Anyway, the Netflix show is its own separate thing. Mary Kay Place is in this. I mean, there's so many amazing
Karen
people.
Black.
Karen Black, I forgot about
Karen
that.
Black, come on. Madrigal invites Marianne right when she first moves in. She invites her over for dinner, and she's got two friends over. In the book, they're these an old hippie and like an old beatnik, basically. You know, they're
yes, Country Joe and the Fish,
singing. Yeah, past eras of swing in San Francisco that we get to meet at this dinner party with Marianne for the first time. And in the series, it's Country Joe. Country Joe, who gets to sing a couple of times in this series, and Brian, I don't know if you noticed, Brian has a Country Joe McDonald poster in his apartment.
Oh, I've missed that.
Yeah. And the woman is Sid Straw. Anyway, just look it all up. It's amazing. Like the references to die for. So good. We get to see Beach Blanket Babylon.
Right.
We get to see, they go to the the place where all the rich people go in the forest.
Redwoods?
Yeah, but what's it called? The something grove. Or is it just called the Grove? Anyway, it's this playground of the rich that is extremely secretive even today. People do not know what goes on.
I don't know what's going on.
Edgar takes Anna there, secretly on a date because he can get in because he's a member. Anyway, it's amazing. It's so entertaining. It's so well done. It's got all of the best lines from the book. There's a little bit of stuff that's in the second book that ends up in the series. I think just because the lines are so funny and the lines are so good. Like there's this whole thing. And again, when Armistead Maupin wrote this, he didn't know what was coming. So there's this whole thing with the A-gays, the A-list gays, the rich gays, who are all white, by the way. Mm-hmm. One of them is trying to get all the other ones to enlist in an idea that he has, which I thought was actually quite a good idea. An idea for a nursing home for gays. And this is in the second book, but they put it in the first series. The series, Michael's there, but in the book, he's not there when this conversation happens. And so they have this idea for this, because I forget, they say there's so many 100 and some thousand homosexuals in San Francisco. They're all going to be getting older, and they need to have a place where they can go where they won't be discriminated against. And so let's all make them a really nice nursing home. And they're talking about this and how, there's this population and it's going to be aging. And I'm thinking, no, it's not.
Yeah, that's right.
Even if it is 100,000, it's something like at least 20,000, I think, died in San Francisco.
Yeah.
I mean, 1 in 5, that's a lot. They just don't know. And all the swinging and all the, you read it now, but Armistead Maupin, when he's having the characters talk about this, they were just talking about it because we didn't know. And so his characters discover it and are experiencing it kind of in real time, the way that we were experiencing it in real time. So it's just so interesting to me, just the whole thing about AIDS, like other pandemics, doesn't care how much money you have. Doesn't care what color you are. We know when we're watching these scenes, reading it today. We didn't know when we read it originally, or certainly if you read it in the San Francisco Chronicle, you didn't know that those so-called A-list gays were going to be hit just as hard as the folks that they were purporting to be helping. So it's just really interesting.
The big reveal, I should say, is it's 6 episodes, and by the way, it's available everywhere. It's super. You'll go through it so quickly.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Watch it. Exactly. I mean, it's a heat wave. Just stay home and watch this. It starts. I mean, everybody's talking like Margos says. She's got a secret. She's got a secret, and then Norman is like, that woman's got something. I'm going to find out about it, because he's a detective on top of everything else that he does.
There's a client. We don't know who it is.
There's a client
who's pestering him on the phone throughout the series to get more information. We know it's a woman. She has hired Norman to investigate Mrs. Madrigal. That's, of course, why he is renting his place there. And yeah, he's just very creepy. The guy is sufficiently slimy. Stanley DeSantis. I think he's somebody else David Paymer, I think he is for some reason. It's Stanley DeSantis. Sorry. He's great, by the way. He's like super creepy and great, but he says it's an anagram. This whole story is an anagram. And so he's like taking these letters, tiles, and trying to figure it out. And Mrs. Madrigal had this relationship. He finds out that on his deathbed that his daughter Dee Dee is going to have a baby, and he says, "Oh, Mr. Halcyon,
Mr. Halcyon, sorry, Edgar." And Edgar is saying like, "Oh, think of the name Anna. I think that's a beautiful name for a little girl." And
and his wife's like, "What? I've never heard that name.
I never heard that name before." And the daughter's like, "I don't know, but it's what he wants. It's on his deathbed." And Mrs. Madrigal's having her Christmas party, and Mona shows up, and everybody's showing up. And as we're looking at him using the tiles, the Scrabble tiles, a man and a girl, that's what Madrigal spells out. So basically, Mrs. Madrigal is trans, and she started as a man, and we find out later, I'll spoil everything, she's actually the parent of Mona. Mm-hmm. Which... yeah. And then they're like, well, how's that possible?
That's what the whole second book is about, is how some of Anna's origin, but how Mona and Anna come to terms with their actual relationship. Because from Mona's point of view, she had a father named Andy who just up and left them when she was 2, I think. And so she does have this kind of always has this kind of unresolved thing about her. She doesn't know anything about her dad, really. She doesn't know, except that he left. And she doesn't have a great relationship with her mom. We kind of see throughout this book. They have phone calls and whatnot. And so, so she's a little bit lost that way. And in the second book is when she, it kind of comes to a head, and she runs away from Barbary Lane and ends up finding out the truth about her father. And I will say... So after the original series, he wrote a book called The Days of Anna Madrigal, which is, I think he wrote it right before the pandemic. It's very good. I really liked it. And it really goes into greater and much more interesting detail of Anna's journey, her early life. What were the circumstances around her running away from home? Because we learned that she ran away from home. It wasn't just because, she ran away from home at a very young age, and somehow in the meantime she gets married and has a child as a man, and then leaves them and eventually, becomes her true self. So the Days of Anna Madrigal is very good. I really enjoyed it. It takes a lot of place, in her youth, mm-hmm. and also in it was super, super good. And then he just recently wrote us a book called Mona of the Manor, which is kind of a prequel. It goes back in time a bit, and it gives us a little bit more about Mona. Mona eventually ends up in Britain, which is where Armistead Maupin eventually ended up. So there's a couple of the books that take place in the UK, which is also super fun. So it's just wonderful. I just love this series so much. This television series, though, it's so good. I was a little nervous that it wasn't going to
age well,
be as good as I remembered. Yeah, that it wasn't going to hold up as well. It 100% holds up. If anything, it's even better because, it's even more in the past than it was. Laura Linney is absolutely perfect. That's Mary Ann Singleton. I mean, who else are you going to get? Of course, it's Laura Linney. She's perfect.
We should say, once again, it was airing on PBS in America. It was a huge hit. And it aired weekly. You had to wait. And I was one of those people.
And see.
What happens? How is this going to turn out? They had so many complaints from people because of it. They were saying it's sexually explicit. And it's not that bad. I mean, I don't understand. But
it's interesting. You do see, for the time, I guess it was. In terms of nudity, profanity, any of those sorts of things, that's not in the book.
Right.
And anytime you see nudity, except for maybe one butt in a bathhouse. Anytime you see boobs, it is not in a sexual context. It's not like, oh, sexy time, here are the boobs. It's Mona's changing.
Right.
She's uninhibited about Marianne. She just met Marianne, and Mona's like just taking off her top and changing clothes. Does not care. So there's that, but that, and even that wasn't unusual for PBS at the time. You would see stuff like that every now and again.
Yeah, it's just that it was so popular. So there were people who are like, well, what's this all about? And then they tune in, and then people get freaked out for whatever reason. So that's why it wound up on Showtime. And I think it was 98, and then 2001 they did one. And then Netflix came out a few years ago, and it was Elliot Page and Zosia Mamet, Victor Garber, and they...
Yeah, Bob the drag queen's in it.
All the drag queens. And it's okay. It's just, for me, it wasn't as strong as the original. I mean, the original recipe for me is just perfection.
Yeah, the Netflix series is supposed to be like the culmination of Anna's story, but I only barely looked at it and I was like, I don't know about this. I would say like the Days of Anna Madrigal is a really very satisfying tying of that bow for that character in that series, more than the Netflix series. He wrote it. I'm pretty sure he wrote it after the Netflix series. So maybe I wonder, like, did he feel that way too? And so he wrote this book. I don't know, but I did really like it. So, but then Margot, so book or series.
This is a tie. I'm gonna have to say a tie. For me, this is a tie because I can't pick which one I like better. I kind of want to watch the series again. I
totally could watch the series again. It's so good. I wasn't as crazy about the second and third iteration, the series of the series season, if you will, if you're in the U.S. I think the first one is, as I said, perfection. It is absolutely perfectly done. I liked the little touches that they included in this first series from some of the later books, although it is perfect, pretty much exactly adapted from the first book. But there's some extra little things, little tidbits for us in there. Gosh, it's hard to say. I'm going to say tie because they just got it so right. Again, Olympia Dukakis, who are you going to get? Who else are you going to get? Name me one person who's Anna Madrigal that's not, maybe there's an amazing trans woman, actor that we don't know about that would be perfect. But I just think she just embodies that character so beautifully. You just look at her and I so believe her as a fan of the series. I so believe her whole past is in this character that I'm looking at in this scene, And the same thing with Laura Linney. Marcus, what's your name? Marcus D'Amico?
D'Amico as Mouse.
Oh my gosh, he's so wonderful.
And it looks like the house looks like I thought it would.
Exactly.
I mean, they have
the house.
And they get time and place so well, like 70s, Mary Hartman, just all these little things that's like, oh, if I could go back in time and be a part of all that. I mean, but they do present things, the good and the bad and the ugly. I mean, all that stuff. It's like I said, it's very human. I like these people. I feel like I know these people. Almost no notes. It's just they really did it right. They really, really did it right. I think I might call it a tie. I really enjoyed it that much. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Yes.
Somehow the movie was like exactly what I imagined in my head. I don't know how they managed that, but they did it, and they did it with this too, and it's just wonderful. 10 out of 10, recommend.
Yeah.
So what are we doing next?
I was thinking because Hulu has a documentary from Andrew McCarthy called Brats, and a lot of people are talking about that, and that's totally our generation. And on Kindle Unlimited, Andrew McCarthy's book, Brat, is available. And I thought that could be an interesting, because this is like, he's taking this thing that he wrote about, and he kind of mentions in the book, but he also has an interesting past. Like his career is very interesting. New York 1980s stage and film and stuff like that. And then talking about the effect the Brat Pack label had on all these people, or in his mind, the effect that it had versus like other people he talks to, which is, I think it would be a fun comparison.
Yeah, it's not terribly long. So, yeah, let's do that. That sounds good.
Okay, great.
And is it on, I'm sorry, you said it's on Hulu, right?
It is on Hulu.
Okay.
And it's our generation, and it's just I think it would be a really interesting contrast. So, okay, cool. That's going to be the next episode. Please send us your suggestions, all those places I mentioned at the top of the show. Our email, once again, is bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. Margot, where can they find you?
You can find me online at coloniabook.com, and all my social media callouts are at She's Nacho Mama. And where could they find you?
You can find me at brooklynfitchick.com. I'm at brooklynfitchick for Instagram and Threads, and then I'm at Brooklyn Margot for TikTok and for Twitter. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Happy Pride Month, everybody. Go out and celebrate.
Happy Pride.
We'll be back soon with a new episode.
Family.
Thank you so much for listening to the Book versus Movie podcast. We're a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You could find more podcasts you will love at frolic.media/podcasts. You could find us on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram at Book versus a Movie. Just spell it all out. We have a Patreon page. Type in there Book vs. Movie Podcast, where you can find 8 years worth of shows. You can follow Margot D on social media at Brooklyn Margot and also Brooklyn Fitchick. You can find Margot P at She's Nacho Mama. Thank you again for listening, and please be sure to send along your suggestions for the show. Remember, the book needs to be easy to get your hands on, and the movie has to be streaming on a major platform. We will